I don't think I've told that story before, so you're the first.
So I'm catching up with Navid Khavari, who's the narrative director on Far Cry 6. Welcome, Navid.
It's nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
It's very exciting stuff that Far Cry 6 is nearly due for release. And, this is something we look forward to every time a new one comes out. You've got some massive credits under your belt. You've worked on Far Cry 5, The Division, Far Cry Primal, which I think is probably one of my favorite of the Far Cry games.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it's a really cool one. Far Cry 4, Splinter Cell, Assassin's Creed, and even Lost Girl, the interactive motion comic. So
That's right.
a lot of credits under your belt there. Writing for video games, was that something that you always sort of you sought out to do, or how does it differ from writing in television and film? Can you talk about the pros and cons of that?
Oh, I never knew writing in video games was a job until I was almost, 30. So I think the main thing was I was supposed to be a political science policy wonk, then I was supposed to be a musician, and then I was writing screenplays, and then somehow I ended up at a game company. So there was no silver bullet for me. But one thing I quickly realized is the games is such a frontier of innovation in terms of storytelling, and you realize it right off the bat that the scope of what we're dealing with of story and the amount of story that you're capable of, it's a dream come true. So I never looked back the moment I realized it was a job.
It's pretty amazing. I mean, there'll be plenty of young people listening to this radio broadcast and the podcast and everything, who'd love a career in video games. And it's one of those things where you finish the game and the credits start rolling and you go, wow, there are so many people who work on this game. A game like Far Cry 6, how many people work on that?
Oh, I don't have a number for you, but it was studios from around the world. We're talking hundreds of people, and it's we had folks working both as Toronto's lead studio, and then we worked in close collaboration with Ubisoft Montreal, who had led development of the previous Far Cry's, but everywhere from Ubisoft Berlin to Kiev, which handled things like accessibility. It's kind of this global opus that you're sort of managing all together, of just master craftsmen. Like these people, I can't praise them enough. I wish I could just have all these people on these shows so they could talk a little bit instead of me. But it's really a global effort.
And that's interesting too, because you've got so many people in different offices. Over the last year or so, with the impact of COVID-19, has seen a lot of normal workplaces adapt to the new norm of working from home, etc. So, what was it like working remotely during making Far Cry 6, or was it just business as normal because you guys are always so sort of remote?
Well, I think just like everyone, COVID really came out of nowhere for us, and to the point that it was our last day of shooting with Giancarlo Esposito as Anton, and the word was coming in that that COVID was shutting everything down. So we weren't even sure he was going to be able to leave Toronto. Like that's how down to the wire it was. And right up to the last day of shooting, we shot on the Friday, and I think the studio shut down on the Tuesday. So I don't think I've told that story before, so you're the first. But it was unbelievable, and I think credit to the studio and the folks in charge who recognized very quickly that this was unprecedented, and so we did have an extension so that we could try and ship this thing healthily. But most of the credit goes to the team because shipping a game is already difficult enough, but shipping it amidst a global pandemic was just a Herculean effort. And everything from our IT folks, just imagine that, right? Trying to get all
Yeah.
of that stuff online for remote work, to our individual team members who managed to still put in the love and the craft and the time that was needed, and really also look out for each other, and check in on each other to make sure that we were sort of shipping healthily
Yeah.
as best as we could. So, we managed to do it, and it's really, I still can't believe it.
Yeah.
It's still amazing to me, and it's full credit to the team.
Yeah. I guess it is like a business. Hey, so like even like with something like that comes in, you've got a certain budget set to make this video game, and then you're going to have to flip everything, and then start setting up home offices for people. And there's a cost associated with all of that. So
Mm,
you've done very well to get the game out, and as you said, a healthily as well, which is incredible. Let's get on to talking about the narrative in the game.
hmm
Of course, Far Cry's always had amazingly complex villains. So to have the master himself of TV and movie villains, Giancarlo Esposito, come in for Far Cry 6, I mean, how did, and previous Far Cry games, you've had stars in there as well, but I don't think you've like had someone who's just so well known as the ultimate villain. For his work on Breaking
right.
Bad and stuff like that. So, um, so did you have the character in mind already, or was it Giancarlo came on board and you're like, oh, we need to shift this, we need to make this more
Right.
Giancarlo?
Well, we had the character in mind already. I think we spent a lot of time crafting Anton before the casting process, and we always. It was really once we hit sort of the father-son dynamic, and started fleshing out the character more, and also realizing we wanted Anton to be Afro Yaran as well,
Yeah.
that Giancarlo's name was always there, but then slowly we started to realize he's the guy. And then you sort of know when you start writing scripts and you start hearing the person's voice in your head,
Yeah.
you're like, okay, can we just make this happen now? Because
Yeah.
this I think this is going to work. So we did have a casting process, and then finally, when we found out that Giancarlo might be interested, we flew down to New York to meet him. It was a 4-hour session talking about everything under the sun. But the moment he walked in, honestly, the guy is the snappiest dresser you've ever seen, and
Yeah.
he
Right.
has a presence that's unbelievable. We sort of could just tell that this was going to be it, and he really knew how to bring an empathy and a power to Anton, especially in terms of the father-son dynamic, that he really crafted something special.
That's great. I guess you hear it a lot that the greatest villains in stories don't know that they're the villain. They think they're the hero of the
Mhm.
story. Is that the case with Anton?
Absolutely. I think with Anton, I didn't even like using the word villain
Yeah.
in the dev process.
Yeah.
I say antagonist. I don't know.
Okay.
It sounds
Yeah.
like he's the person who we've set up as the main force to fight against. And I think Giancarlo saw it the same way from Anton's perspective. He wants Yara to be wealthy and prosperous, and he wants his island to his son to inherit that legacy. And
Mm.
so he doesn't care how he gets there as long as it gets done. And I think that there's a lot of folks in the world that see things that way, and I think it poses that question to the player, of well, from a certain point of view, is this justified?
Yeah, it's true. And it's you obviously take a lot of inspiration from real world like environments and political situations. So, what's it like taking one of those like real world situations, and how do you adapt that to a more fantastical story?
Well, I think for us, and it's important to say, we've been, very clear, like our primary inspiration
Mm.
was Cuba, and in particular, we looked at figures, um, uh, and I think, the gut might go to someone like Castro, but we actually looked directly at Fulgencio Batista, who
Yeah,
was
right.
the figure that Castro ousted as one of the inspirations for Anton. But we looked at individuals like Pinochet. We looked at throughout history at dictators that we've seen, and what you start to see is those commonalities between them of how they can sort of lull people into thinking that they are the only person that can save the country. And we started to invest that into Anton. And then on the flip side, in terms of the revolutionaries, likewise, we looked through history and in contemporary times in terms of not just Cuba's history, but we looked at protests that are happening in Venezuela right now or
Mm.
have been happening in history of Colombia, the Arab Spring. We looked quite a bit at that, and really what we wanted to capture was the complexity of revolution. And that dynamic of we like to think of these things as black and white. We like to think of these things as
Yeah,
there's one revolutionary group, where what we were trying to capture and sort of in a way do honor to is the complexity of that revolutionary movement. There's folks in our game, if you're from the farmlands, they're only fighting for the farmlands. They're not
yeah,
worried about the rest of the island. And then there's university students in Far Cry 6 that feel, who run this group La Morale, that feel we need to be more militant. And the previous generations are the ones that put us here in the first place. So we wanted to capture that complexity, and I think it just grounds the narrative more, and hopefully our players take something away from that.
and it's such a massive game. Like the way you're talking about all the different factions throughout it,
Hmm.
and the map itself is so massive now that you've gone out to include urban areas as well. I suppose you can't
Hmm.
really have this revolutionary tale without urban areas because in a
Yeah.
lot of these countries, that's where a lot of the damage is done. So was that a big deal to make it like the biggest and best that you could?
Well, I mean, the moment we said that we were going to do a country, we knew we had to have a capital city, and
Yeah,
you can't get around that. And I think uh, we've talked a lot about Esperanza capital city, but even like the scope, just to give you a sense of the scope of this, we have three massive towns, almost like mini cities or towns, spread throughout the map
yeah,
as well. So it provides a really interesting balance for the player and a contrast for the player. And just like any revolutionary movement, tactically, you're trying to unite all these groups together and essentially circle the seat of power, which is Esperanza. So even logically, from a tactical perspective, we had to do it, and I'm
yeah.
glad we did, because it really it changes the game.
And it really pushes boundaries too. I mean, that's what Far Cry is all about. Each and every year, it gets bigger and better,
Hmm.
and includes like the introduction of the dog a few years back. That was
Yep.
such a different change in the in the
Boomer.
in the yeah, that was so great. But it added a different dynamic to the story as well.
Hmm.
This time around, you've got the character of Danny, who can be played as either male or female. So,
Hmm.
how does that change the narrative for you?
Well, really tried to see Danny as sort of one canonical Danny.
Mm,
Whether they're male or female is just more up to the player how they'd want to see themselves represented. And I think what we really wanted to do with Danny is uh, tell a story about someone who is local to the island, someone who's
yeah,
from Yara, and really comes from the opposite end of the spectrum of what Anton is. If
yeah,
you watch that trailer on the boat that's been out for a bit of time now,
yeah, yeah,
Anton doesn't even notice Danny on there.
yeah.
And so really we wanted to tell the story of how just an average person who could you wouldn't notice on the street can find themselves the tip of the spear of a revolutionary movement. And
I
there
guess it's like
are
that.
examples of that in the past, right?
Oh, sorry. I guess it's like that scene in Marvel's Endgame, where Thanos
Right.
says to the Scarlet Witch, "I
Hmm.
don't even know who you are."
Right.
You know,
Right.
they're getting ready, and it's like,
Exactly. I
this
forgot about
massive
that line.
power.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a great scene. It's a great line. But yeah, that's exactly it. I think and that is in a sense something that Danny will exploit. And without going
Mm.
into spoiler territory, I think that's a good way of looking at it.
Fantastic. So I've got one more question for you, and
Sure thing.
this is your chance for you to use your imagination a little bit. Let's say HBO or Netflix are backing up the money truck, and they've said we were.
That's a great start to a question. I like where this is going. Okay.
and they're saying we want to make a Far Cry TV show.
Mm.
Which game from the whole series of Far Cry do you choose, and why?
Far Cry 6. I mean, I think legally I'm obligated to tell you Far Cry 6. There's like probably some contract in a Ubisoft office. But I'll tell you, not to make a fun question like that serious. We actually designed the story and structured it around as if we were doing a television
Yeah.
series. And even when I came on as narrative director, we built writers' rooms just as if we were building
Mm.
a television show. And if you play the game, we actually try to treat each aspect of the map that you're looking at as ultimately a season of a TV show. And if you start to look at, and I don't want to get too under the hood here, but
Yeah, yeah,
if you
yeah.
look at how it's constructed, Far Cry 6 is really 4 seasons of TV crammed into one game. So yeah, I mean, it's ready. If anyone's listening, let's go. We got the scripts.
Back that money truck up. Well, we can't wait to get in and actually play Far Cry 6. We're gonna games like this we spend hours and hours playing, so it is kind of like binging a
I
show.
love it.
But
Yeah.
it's one that you can go back to over and over and replay in different ways and
Mhm.
learn something new. So we're really looking forward to seeing all your hard work come to fruition
I
with this
appreciate
brand new
that.
game.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for your time too.
Thanks for having me.